Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are going to get started here. Um, Thank you for joining us in. This is the second episode of our Visceral storytelling series here within Heleus. My name is Sean. I am the Director of Development here within Heleus. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, so again, this is our second episode within our Visceral Storytelling series. My name is Sean. I am the Director of Development here within Heleus, and today's topic we are going to be covering is the Beginner's Guide to Creating a Character in Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. This is going to be a lot of information more so geared towards those of you that are very early on getting into D&D or have at least a more basic knowledge. However, there may be some information in here even more veteran players may learn for the first time or gain a new perspective on and just overall learn a little bit something new about character creation and some of the more specific outliers. So we are going to go ahead and get jumping on in here. So first, we're going to talk about the topics that we'll be covering here today. First off, we'll have some of the first things you're going to want to consider when it comes to character creation, followed by the topic of choosing your race, then choosing your class. We're going to talk about character stats and how that can affect character creation and even a little bit of gameplay. And then we're going to transition into a larger scope of your description details of your character. There's going to be a lot of subtopics in there. And then to finish things off, we're going to take all of these topics that we've discussed and we're going to work together to create a character using these tips and guidelines. So, under the first things to consider, to begin with, you're going to want to have a discussion with your dungeon master about their guidelines and limitations they may have. Dependent on the campaign that is going to be run, whether it is a pre-made campaign or even a homebrew campaign, your DM may decide that there are limitations on the style of race and classes that you are able to play and make your character as. Um, Most dungeon masters will have limitations on allowing their players to go into some of the more expansive races and classes to try to keep things a little bit more on the simple side, keeping more towards the standard player handbook characters, classes, and races, and maybe a little bit more into some of the slightly expansive official approved classes and races. So it's good to be aware of what your DM would be looking for in that regard. Um, some other things to be good to talk to your DM about is maybe even getting an understanding of some of the specific groups and organizations that exist within the world. Like if one of your first thoughts is that you want to create a rogue character, maybe you were thinking of making them a little bit more of an assassin style of a character. Ask your DM if there's any sort of thieves guilds, assassination guilds, or anything of that consideration within the world that the campaign is going to be set within. One of the next things to consider is what the party is going to need. A lot of this is going to come from talking with the other players that are going to be within your party. You may want to discuss what sort of like if there's any roles that need to be filled, like have any of the other players figured out even a small detail about what the kind of character they want to be. Has someone decided that they definitely, want to be more of a magic casting, spell slinger? Does anyone want to be more of a melee fighter? Is your team going to be in need of a healer? Does no one really want to fill that role? Maybe you'll have to fill that role. Um, but the important thing is to talk with the other players and kind of figure out, get a nice, well balanced party if you want to have a high chance of succeeding, that is. Then the one of the last things you'll want to do during the things to consider is figuring out, of course, what do you want to play. I mean, it's going to be you and others, of course, but your main concern should be making sure that you're having fun because you're putting your time into it. So if no one has really discussed about, finer details with what they want to play during your discussion with the other players, you may decide, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there and say that I want to be more of like a melee player. I want to be a spellcaster. I want to be a healer. Make your voice heard. Um, and then besides the actual, play style of what your character would be, consider, is there a specific trait that you would want your character to embody? Like, do you want them to, you know, be more of like a sneaky thief type of deal? Um, that could come into consideration of how you create your character, for sure. The next consideration for yourself is going to be in choosing your race. In the general sense, you're going to aim to select a race that'll fit the style of character that you're looking to play. This may fall into some of the more cliches. So, as an example, I have here that generally speaking, you may select a half orc as your barbarian due to their physical traits and characteristics. They just kind of embody that more, um, barbarian like character. But it doesn't always have to be like that. That's just if you're going for, more of a cliche feel for what would kind of, I guess, quote unquote, make sense for the class you're looking to play. Another determining factor for selecting your race could be if you're looking to gain a specific racial bonus. As an example here, I have that you could specifically want to play a halfling just because of the fact that you'd receive the lucky ability, which would allow you to re-roll certain natural ones that you may end up rolling. Um, so specifically getting a specific racial benefit for your character. And then there's also the opportunity just to spice things up, going for uncommon or oddball combinations. An example I have here is like a Goliath wizard. Most people wouldn't exactly think of a Goliath being a character that would be a spellcaster. I mean, they're large, hulking, half giant race. They would usually be more of a barbarian type class. It might be fun just to kind of change things around and kind of break out of the norm and make them a wizard. One of the next things is going to be with choosing your class. So, in your discussion with the other players, did you discuss about filling a role within the party? If a healer was needed, you may go a cleric. They have a lot of utility in regards to healing spells and things of that sort. Was your party going to be in more of a need of a stealthy lockpick? You may want to go with a rogue. They have a lot of assets that help with that style. Um, you also may want to aim to pick a class that just in general you want to play. You want to be able to hit stuff hard? Play a barbarian. Do you want to be a magic caster with more of that natural talent? You may want to play a sorcerer. Because remember, in the end, you're going to be playing the game. You're going to make sure you're playing something you're going to be having fun with. And then the last section towards choosing your class is want to make sure that you can select a class that just makes sense for the character that you're wanting to role play. So if your one of the traits that you wanted your character to embody was that they're going to be more of like a shy, not very talkative, quiet, staying to themselves kind of a person, you may not find too often that there's going to be a bard that would embody that. Bards are going to be more outgoing and boisterous. So it wouldn't really make sense for a role-playing standard to have a bard that's really shy. It could be an interesting concept, but it is something to consider when it comes to the role-playing aspect of your character. The next section is going to come into talking about your character stats. So first off, there are multiple methods for determining what your character stats are going to be. The three different methods are generally going to be between the rolled method, the point buy method, and the standard array method. Not to go into too crazy detail about it, but essentially, the first thing you'd want to consider is talking with your DM, figuring out which of these three methods, whether it's a specific one of those methods, or if they give you, your choice between all three, of which method is going to be used to determine the stats for your character. Um, Generally speaking, with the, if your DM does give you completely free reign of using like any of the three options, a simplified way of thinking about each of them is starting with the standard array. You're going to find that it is going to have the least amount of customization available to it, as you're going to have your 6 numbers that are all predetermined, and the only customization option you are going to get is placing those numbers in a specific stat. So you get to choose, which of those numbers is going to go into your strength, for example, but you only get to use that number once, and then you have the remaining 5 to go into your others. The point buy system is going to give you a little bit more customization than the standard array. You'll of course be able to choose, which points go into which stat. But with this method, you use, like the name implies, more of a point buy system to determine what your 6 numbers that are available to you are going to be. The higher the number, the more points it's going to cost. So that's where it gets a little bit more of the customization factor compared to the standard array. And then lastly, with the rolled section, this is going to be your biggest method of full customization. However, you're going to have that offset of it being more of a gamble, because you're not going to be able to specifically choose what your numbers are going to be, like you would in the point buy system and having that limitation available to you. It's going to be entirely up to your luck and chance of what you roll for each of your 6 numbers, but at least you're able to pick and choose where you place those 6 numbers, just like in the other 2 methods. Next up, when it comes to considering, once you get your stats determined, what your 6 numbers are going to be, generally speaking, you're going to want to place your higher numbers into the stats that you want to be better, that you want your character to be better at doing, and you're generally going to place your lower numbers in the stats that you're less concerned with. And a method for helping to consider where you may want to place your stat focus, consider how your character is affected by their stats. If you are playing more of we'll just use the barbarian as an example, as more of a melee fighter, a lot of their strengths comes from their strength stat, which in the general sense transitions. I have some examples listed here of what you could consider each of the categories to be embodied by. More of their physical power. So you may want your highest stat to go into your strength as a barbarian. And then they may not be super concerned about their intelligence or wisdom. They're not exactly using a lot of their book smarts. So most people would consider intelligence to be their least concerned stat with a barbarian. So in the general sense, if we go through all of them here, how your character is affected by their stats. Strength is more so determined by, my opinion, I would call that physical power. Dexterity is going to be more of the coordination. Constitution is going to be their physical status. Intelligence is going to be more defined by book smarts. Wisdom is going to be a little bit more on the street smarts. And your charisma is going to be more of your people smarts. Next up, we're going to discuss the bigger section here, the description details. So the first subcategory we'd have here is coming into naming your character. Now, when it comes to naming your character, you could just completely choose something random. The choice is ultimately yours. It is your character. Um, but in the general sense, almost all the time, the name of your character is going to be racially influenced. Um, you're not necessarily going to be, in the in the world of D&D, you're not going to necessarily just, randomly come across a dwarf whose name is Bob. They're going to have more of a dwarvish name. So, one of the methods that I like to use personally, just, when I make a lot of different characters. So something that can kind of help you keep things fresh is using a random name generator. They can be extremely helpful. There's even name generators out there that are specific to certain races, fantasy races. So if you want to, pull up a dwarvish random name generator, that can be extremely helpful in determining, giving you at least ideas about, what a name could be for your character. Uh, the next section is going to be discussing in your character's background. Now, your character's background is a general idea of what your character did before becoming an adventurer. An example I have listed here is a soldier. Um, as part of your character's background, you could say that before they decided to take their swing at being an adventurer, maybe they were a part of a military force of some sort. Maybe they were an officer of a kingdom's military, and that's kind of where a little bit of their background and their fighting style would come from. Um, your character's background could also not only be something from before they became an adventurer. It can even be an ongoing facet that affects your character. A really common example of how that would be is with the haunted one. Now, uh, usually with the haunted one background, it's that they are being affected by something from their past that continues to affect them, and your character is continuously working towards resolving that issue. And that can be an interesting method of playing out your character and giving them more depth. Um, the next section is going to be talking about character details. You'd obviously want to figure out, what is the gender of your character. You're gonna want to figure out the alignment. Where do they fall on the spectrum for good, neutral, evil, and the lawful, neutral, chaotic spectrum? Um, are they more of an embodiment of a good, wholesome character? Are they just downright evil? Do they not really swing in either direction? Are they kind of right in that middle ground? Um, and then with kind of like their morals, I guess you could say, do they fall a little bit more on the lawful, the neutral, or the chaotic spectrum? Um, and this will affect how you portray your character and roleplay them. And then you would also need to figure out, the faith of your character, or if they even do. Does your character follow or worship any sort of specific deity? That's a very good thing to know when it comes to creating your character, specifically if you are playing a class like a paladin or a cleric. What deity do they worship? Do they get their power from? Next section we would have here is in regards to the physical characteristics of your character. Now, this can be, anything from, like their eye color, the size of your character, their height, weight, their age, their skin color, hair color, all of their physical characteristics that, determine what your character looks like. Um, then you would have things like your character's personal characteristics. So their personality traits. You would have things like when you are creating your character, like, do you want your character to embody, someone that is a little bit more of, just downright like truthful. You want to make sure that they're like always honest. Is that one of the personality traits? You have their ideals. Like what drives your character? Are they on a quest to avenge their family? You would have their bonds. Do they, have like a specific, individual or group of people that they are bonded to. Usually this type of thing is going to be, family and friends, colleagues, for your character. And then lastly, you would have things like your character's flaws, kind of a little bit more of like what can be their downfall. And it's important to have things like flaws because you don't want to just, completely make your character this, perfect being, because it's not really realistic. It's a lot more fun with roleplay aspects to be able to have things that gives your character a little bit more of the downsides. Like, as an example, do they just have a really bad habit of lying? Can they just not stop themselves? And being able to roleplay that can, create a lot of interesting aspects in the gameplay as well, and put you in, really interesting scenarios. Um, the next section is talking about different affiliations. This can be, groups and individuals, so like organizations. An example, if you have a paladin or a cleric, an organization can be, like what church or temple, you know, is your character a part of, for the specific deity that they worship. If it's like a rogue, are they a part of some sort of thieves guild? Your allies are generally going to be, it can kind of tie into the organizations aspect, but generally speaking, it's going to be individuals that you find yourselves, that your character finds themselves, allied with. You would have like, other members of your adventuring party as an example. And then enemies, again, a little bit more of the, um, generally speaking, individuals, but there can be groups that would fall into this as well. Like, if your deity has a specific being that, you know, they are against, maybe there's a cult that follows that, more that, that evil deity aspect of it. So you may consider that entire cult an enemy. Or maybe there's even just individuals. Like if part of your character's background was that your family had been your character's your character's family had been like murdered or something like that by a certain individual. Maybe that individual in themselves is an enemy rather than an entire group. And then lastly, you would have the bigger section here, which is going to pertain to the character's backstory. Now, a more specific and detailed segment in regards to the history of your character leading up to the present is like what the backstory is going to be. So, um, in my opinion, I do find that the backstory is one of the most important aspects to character creation. Um, where in reality, this can be as vague or as detailed as you wish for it to be. The choice ultimately is entirely yours. If you're looking to have a character that has a lot of depth to them, um, then yeah, you may want to put more time in here. Keep in mind, I have it listed here that more detail would also equal a greater opportunity for roleplay, while less detail may equal a lower opportunity for roleplay. Having specific details about your character and their origin story, essentially. A way that can help you with creating your character's backstory, consider using a timeline method to highlight key points of significance in your character's life. Um, when it comes down to it, if you want to be as detailed as possible, you can, have your timeline start off with, something as specific as, when and where they were born. Um, was your character, did they, were they born in the slums area of uh, of one of the sections of the city of Waterdeep on the Sword Coast? Um, how did that, like affect them growing up? Being born into more of a poverty situation. You can transition into saying that they had to survive on their own, without any sort of family or anything like that. In the slums for the first several years of their life. Um, and then you can say that there was another key event that occurred at a certain age of their life that kind of transitioned to the next step of their life, and so on and so forth. Just you're looking for those key details that affected your character and kind of transition them into the next moment up until you get to the present of where the campaign starts, and you have all of these bits and pieces of information about your character's origin story that you can use for roleplay. Now, for this next section here, we are going to work at creating a character together. Give me just one moment here as we get this all working up here. Let's see. So what I was aiming to do here was to see if we have any comments within the live YouTube stream here to assist with creating a character together. I apologize those that have already been, posting into the chat. I unfortunately have not been able to have that overlay pulled up. Let's see. I do know that there is a delay. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I think I've got it fixed up here. If you can let me know in the chat if you are able to hear me. Okay, it appears that the issues have been resolved. So, yeah, let's continue here. So what we want to do is work at creating a character using the tips and topics that we covered here today. Um, as a bit of a starting point, I'd say generally speaking, when it comes to creating your character, you may want to start with getting an understanding of how you want your like what you want your character to embody. Do you want them to be um, let's see here. Um, I guess physically standing, would you want them to be um, like a bigger, brawlier style of a character? Would you want them to be a little bit more of kind of like a roguish style, you know, focusing more on stealth? Would you, do you think that you would want them to be a little bit more of a magic casting style? So, beginning with Zeri here, you had made it known that you want to pick here. How do we think we would want our character to be embodied here? We want them to on their physicality side. We want them to be more of a big and burly, more of a magic caster. What kind of thing we want to find here? A barbarian princess warrior nun. We just may be able to have some fun with that. So probably generally speaking, you would find that more of a barbarian slash warrior style is going to be big and burlier. Would you want this character to embody that style of physicality, or would you want them to kind of break out of that norm and be more of a smaller frame? Is that a yes? Is in regards to making them a bigger physicality or smaller physicality? Got it. Okay. So have them be on the muscular side, but not be completely massive. All right, that's something that could be worked with. Um, so keeping with the barbarian side, that would determine the character's class. We would list them as barbarian. The race, if we're not looking to make them completely massive, yet make them muscular, you say think more of a Viking woman. Um, As far as the race options would go, you have quite a few options in regards to race available. Um, did you have any particular race in mind that you're wanting this character to be? And if we want to keep a bit more, on the plain side and just go with a standard human, that's totally fine. If you want to go something a little bit more branched out with the race, that is entirely up to you. While you answer on the race side of things, we may want to consider, a bit more of the background details and backstory. Um, you were saying that we wanted to make them more of a princess warrior nun. So, part of their, let's see, part of the character's background could be that they were a little bit more on the royalty side. Um, and then when it comes to their background, part of like their origin story could be that they were originally uh, born as a princess in being royalty of a part of a certain kingdom. You come up with like the specific finer details, like what this kingdom is, all that type of stuff. And at a certain key points in their life, maybe they had to, escape pursuers, assassins of some sort that were hired to kill her before she could, basically take over the kingdom as its queen. And at a some point in her early teenage years, that occurred, and she had to flee the palace, um, essentially leave behind her royal name, and maybe she took refuge in a nunnery and disguised herself as a nun. That could be part of the aspect that would explain how she started as princess and transitioned into more of a nun, wanting to protect herself. She did training on the more of the warrior side, and that would explain like why she can kind of take care of herself uh, as a bit more of the warrior aspect. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, a human would likely make a lot of sense in this case. I can definitely agree that it can seem a bit boring to make a human, but sometimes it can definitely just make sense for the story. And there's nothing wrong with it seeming boring if it does make sense for the character, because again, the choice is entirely yours of how you want to make this character. So we have even just a couple key details like that can really hash into your character's story. Glad that you're liking how the story is aspecting so far here. Then when it comes to this character's affiliations, you would say that some of the organizations would be whatever you decide the name of this kingdom is going to be. That would determine as an organization as a whole, the kingdom and the royal family would be considered an affiliation for her. The nunnery that she took refuge in would be considered an organization. Some of her allies would be, any members of the royal family that she would still have good ties with. That's something you'd have to determine within the her origin story. Essentially, is does anyone in the royal family know that she's still alive? Do they think that she was, assassinated? Uh, and that would determine whether she still has allies within the royal aspect of things. Um, and then maybe there's individuals from the nunnery that she would have wound up, you know, growing an attachment to, whether that was, another girl about the same age, maybe something along those lines, an individual that she could have grown an attachment to, and then enemies you could, you know, easily say that, the assassin or assassins that attempted to take her life would be considered an enemy. Maybe there is also a larger, grander organization that had gone after her. Oh, I've just seen your chat here. What if she specifically joined a guild of nuns who are all part of a super badass desert clan, who are all taught to fight from a young age. Yeah, I mean, that could definitely be a reasoning for why she would have that warm warrior aspect of it. They would definitely explain if they're taught at a young age how to fight. Um, let's see. Okay, and to finish back with the affiliation, so maybe there is even more than just individual assassin or assassins. Maybe there's an entire group that was looking to stage some sort of coup or something like that, and they can be a larger group of enemies for this character. Um, let's see. The next thing you want to consider, you know what? How about we even come up with a name for this character? So we know it's going to be a human female. Um, Having initial ties with her origin story as being a member of royalty, that did transition into more of a barbarian warrior fighter nun style. But in the end, her name would likely be most influenced by her birth on the royal aspect of it. So if you have some sort of name. No, it's totally fine. Definitely understand that that lag response can make it difficult using this format, but we certainly make do. So, find out what we feel would be a good name for this character that we've created so far. Zeraphine. Perfect. So, we'll say that this character is Zeraphine, and you can decide whether the character just goes by that name, whether they originally had some sort of royal family last name that they had to drop. Did they decide to come up with some sort of new surname for themselves? Did they just decide to um, make it so that they just dropped their last name entirely and they're just Seraphine now? Like, that's something else that you can decide if you wish. Um, Now, we would find here that if we would want to figure, just keep things a little bit more on the simple side. If you were determining stat priorities for this character, generally speaking, if they're going to be more of a fighter, you may find that strength would be their highest level priority, but dependent on their fighting style. Perhaps dexterity could also work for their highest level of priority. So you can decide which of those two you would decide to be kind of the higher priority here, strength or dexterity. All right, and in regards to the name, we can say that she went with taking on a slight name change, doing a little more of a nickname, going with Zura when she uh, took refuge at the nunnery. And then after deciding whether you would want to have strength or dexterity as more of the priority, we can kind of go down the list of what we think the other stat priorities may be from high to low. Um, Something I can reiterate from earlier is when it comes to these stats, rather than just how these stacks affect actual gameplay, the stats of your character also will affect how this character will be portrayed and role played as. Um, I was stating earlier that a simplified way of thinking about each individual stat, um, corresponds to a specific aspect. So if she were to have a higher level of charisma, that would generally mean that she has better people smarts. She's better at being able to talk to people. And there are several categories to this. She could be better at intimidating people. She could be better at persuading people or deceiving people. Some sort of mixture of those. So you can kind of determine what you feel would make the most sense for this character. For the physicality aspect of it, generally speaking, your strength, dexterity, and constitution would kind of play into a factor of how your character would likely look. Your constitution, more specifically, would affect, generally speaking, your character's physical status. If they have a bit of a lower constitution, they may appear a bit more sickly. If they have a higher constitution, then they would appear much more healthy comparatively. So that's something for consideration. If you think that she was well taken care of at the nunnery, took care of herself, most likely her dexterity, I would assume, would be at the very least above average, or maybe one of her higher end areas. And you're saying here that you would go with dexterity first, strength second. So with dexterity being the highest level of priority, the way that I determine that is you may find that she would be a lot more coordinated. So she would certainly be um, able to finesse a lot better when it comes to her fighting style, most likely. Um, so that would definitely influence your character's weapon choice, even when it came down to it. Um, are they going to be looking to use more of like a, bluntish weapon? Most strength-based characters would do so. In this case, if it's a dexterity character, you may find that a more elegant weapon would be their style when it comes to their fighting aspect. Um, let's see here. So you can decide, again, going back to it, whether you would feel that this character would have a likely average or above average constitution, because that would likely affect how this character would look. I believe that I might not have mentioned it due to the technical issues we were experiencing earlier. Maybe it wasn't heard on the stream here. One of the things that we're doing with creating this character here together is that in our next episode, um, um, Helios owner Ryan is actually going to be taking over that episode, episode 3, with the possibility of being a multi-part episode and taking you all on doing 3D modeling with the character that we create here today. So we're going to be more so looking for a bit more of the physicality aspects of the character today and getting a little bit of those finer details because that just overall may help with creating a 3D physical model of the character. Um, let's see. So we're going to go with intelligence third, followed by constitution, then wisdom, and then charisma. Okay, interesting. So we're going to wind up having charisma be the lowest stat for this character, so not going to be insanely much of a people person. That could definitely be an interesting way of playing out this character. Um, and judging from the placement of Constitution, we would likely say that that score would leave them about an average Constitution, which would make sense because although they may have grown up in, more of like a lavish royalty setting, due to the fact of having to seek refuge at the nunnery, they wouldn't have had access to a lot of that more lavish living style. Um, it could be, that she was just getting just barely enough to be able to get by. maybe slightly impoverished, definitely a lot more humble living situation. So her physical side would show that with that fine mixture of the two, she would probably find herself about an average, physical healthy aspect. So then, just making sure we're keeping track here. So we have the race, class, stat priorities, the name. We have ideas for the background and backstory, the affiliations. Let's find out about some of the character details next. So we have determined that this is going to be a female character. As far as this character's alignment goes, where would we feel that they would fall under the spectrum of their alignment? Would we find them on the good, neutral, or evil side? And then would we find them on the lawful, neutral, or chaotic side? And while the delay on that gets to you there, thinking maybe more of a saber or halberdier, or more of a halberd for the weapon. Okay, so I'd say, yeah, when it comes to the dexterity side, a saber could very much make a lot of sense for a dexterity character, having that more finesse aspect of it. Um, not being completely brutish, having that elegant side to it would definitely make a lot of sense for the character. So, a saber, absolutely, we can save for that here. All right, and while we are figuring out the alignment, the next thing that we would want to determine for the character is where their faith would most likely lie. So we know that born into more of the royal family and then seeking refuge in the nunnery. Do we feel that your character had started off with, worshiping any sort of specific deity? And then if they did, what that deity is, did they continue to do so? Um, or did they maybe not originally worship any sort of deity, but once they, sought refuge at the nunnery, then they began to find an appreciation for worshiping a specific deity um, that is in relation to the nunnery that she escaped to, so we can determine how that aspect of it would go. Okay, and we are finding that we would be more of a lawful neutral, sorry, lawful neutral, and then good as well. Okay, so either a neutral good or a lawful good character. I'd say that the good, having the finer point of her being a good character, could definitely make a lot of sense. Um, she's showing more of that purity side, wholesomely good, not necessarily being born the embodiment of evil by any means. Um, Perhaps the royal family was highly respected and whatnot. Let's see. Don't really know the 5th edition deities off the top of your head. Okay, well, we can just say we could just use. Does anyone else in the chat have any specific 5th edition, style of deity that they think would make sense for this character? if no one has any sort of specific thing they would want to list, we could even just go with something as simple as saying that perhaps this was a nunnery with an affiliation to the main church of Bahamut, which would certainly make sense in regards to your character's most likely aspect of their alignment being more of that kind of that borderline neutral lawful side, but definitely the good. So if they're more of a neutral good or a lawful good, Bahamut would make a lot of sense for their deity of choice. Um, let's see. So we have figured a lot of the character details. Let's go lastly with figuring out some of the characters' personal characteristics and some of their physical characteristics. So some of the personal characteristics, we would say that her bonds would likely be with those of the um, the royal family, and then also with those within the nunnery. Um, what would we say would be some of this character's personality traits? Would she be, perhaps quick to anger, anything like that that would kind of define her personality? And then once we determine that here, um, what sort of ideals would we find our character to have here? What's their drive? Personally, would seem like it would make sense to me that if she was kind of chased out because of assassins and had to seek refuge at the nunnery, perhaps part of her ideal and her drive would be to seek revenge one day, or just even find answers as to why assassins were sent after her in the first place, and that could be the driving force for this character. Um, and you guys can let me know in the chat if you feel like there's something different you want to go for that. So you wouldn't say that she is easily angered. Okay, so kind of more of a calm understanding, likely. Saying being a bit brusque, maybe a bit sheltered, never really developed social skills fully. Okay, that could be definitely a good aspect of it there. Um, and while you decide on whether we like that idea for the ideals or maybe making some change, um, next thing we could figure out would be in regards to the flaws that this character could have. You know, the example I gave earlier. Do we feel like this character could be kind of a notorious liar? Can they just not help themselves and just that's just one of their flaws is when you're role playing this character, you pretty much just always have to lie. Um, doesn't seem like would really make sense for this character a lot of the time. But what do we think would be a good flaw for the character? flaw is that she is just too awesome. Yeah, that is a boom right there. Used to having to fend for herself, still has that royal kind of bearing. So we'd say, let's see. You know, we can actually work with that, with the flaws. Her flaws that she's too awesome. We could probably say that, kind of spin that off a little bit more in the way that, a flaw of hers is that she thinks way too highly of herself, or maybe she carries that over from her royal side, being kind of pompous, being standoffish. Still can't quite get over the aspect of thinking that she's better than your average person. As much as she may have been like working on that after taking refuge within the nunnery, it's just something that she just never could quite shake after however many years, up until her teenage years, I believe we were saying. She was having that royal aspect and royal treatment. So it could be a more of a difficult thing for her to shake. I'd say that'd be a good flaw to have, for this character. Make a lot of sense. Um, let's transition into figuring out the final aspect here, the actual physical characteristics, which, as important as everything else that we've talked about is, when we transition into the next episode of creating the 3D model of our character here, these are going to be some very important details for how the character would literally look alongside of those other aspects. So here we have determined a couple minor things so far. Earlier, we wanted them to be, uh, it's going to be a female character, not going to be like a massive character. Have a little bit more of that muscular aspect. So we would definitely have muscle involved. I'd say more fine-tuned if we're going with more of an elegant finesse style of a fighting aspect. Um, so height, we would want to figure that here. So if we're talking, average human size, um, perhaps if we wanted them to be a little bit larger but not too big, um, perhaps you guys can decide whether you'd want them to likely be somewhere in the upper 5 foot range, possibly even the low 6 foot range, which specifically for human female, for D&D aspect of things, would definitely be above average. So you guys can decide what we think for the height for our character here. Our weight, we did say, not being, huge for, overall character size. So it makes sense that if they are a little bit more, um, nimble and elegant with having a high dexterity, they would be, perhaps, just well toned, not being super scrawny, but still having a bit of that muscle to them. Um, then for her age, we had figured as part of her backstory that we were saying that likely in her teenage years was when she was chased off from the due to the assassins and took refuge at the nunnery. And if we're talking putting her more into the present day of age, if we were to be playing her in a campaign, how long has it been since she had taken refuge in the nunnery? How long has she been, practicing her fighting skills? What would her present age be? That's something you guys can decide in the chat there. Looks like we are talking for height 5'9". I would definitely agree with that. That would make a lot of sense. some of the next things to consider, some of the colorings. So we would have eye color. Um, we can decide what eye color we would want for our barbarian princess, and then as well as her skin color and hair color, and that can help with kind of finalizing the physical details of our character here. So we're seeing 26 and then late 20s. You know what? Let's go with that 26, because that would definitely still fit into that late 20s aspect of it. Um, if we were saying that it was in her teenage years, probably around the age of 15, 16 that she had been chased off, um, we could likely say that about 10 or so years has passed in that time, which would give ample amount of time for training, um, and enough time to have passed storyline wise for a character. Let's see. For hair color, maybe a darker, dirty blonde, kind of like a sand blonde, or a little bit of a darker aspect of it. Yeah, because as an idea, we could possibly even say that originally, it when she was within the palace, maybe it wasn't exactly that super dirty blonde. Maybe it was more of a true blonde color, and she had to do, part of like her disguising herself was to maybe dye the hair in some fashion, giving it more of like that dirty blonde aspect of it, and then the change in lifestyle had a physical effect on her that ultimately did begin to transition her hair color into that more of that sandy, dirty blonde. So that could be an interesting way of showing physical change for this character. Let's see. After the hair color, determine eye and skin color here. You might already be beginning to type out something in regards to in the chat here, but I know that earlier you mentioned that what if part of the whole thing with the nunnery was the guild of nuns are part of a super badass desert clan. So if we're saying that, let's say perhaps let's see. Let's say perhaps this kingdom is more in a climate that's kind of more of like a desert area, a lot of sun involved. We'd probably say that due to the exposure to the sun, being a little bit more tan or slightly darker skinned, would likely make a lot of sense for this character. And then for, I guess, the last aspect of it here, what do we think for eye color? Do we want to go for something standard? Like, do we want to do like a blue, green, brown eyes, or we want to kind of branch out and do something a little bit different? We want to do like maybe purple eyes, or something that would kind of stand out a bit more. Seeing green eyes. All right. Let's Go with green eyes for our character then. The Sharingan. Oh yeah, absolutely. Would definitely make sense to have the Naruto aspect in our D&D character. So, I believe it is safe to say that we have a lot of the more important details for our character. We have determined their race, class, stat priorities, the name, background, character details, physical and personal characteristics, a base understanding of their affiliations, and getting a bit of detail into that backstory as well. Um, so all of these aspects together will definitely help with creating the 3D model of the character in our next episode. Like a piercing green. Okay, yeah, definitely. That would definitely be something that would be able to be embodied for the eye color. Kind of bit more of we'll likely say it's kind of like her what's the wording for it? Her kind of standout feature. What really makes what really pops about the character. So I'd say safe to say we have everything that we need for this then for the next episode. So just as a reminder, remember to tune into our next episode when Heleus owner Ryan covers the 3D modeling class, and we'll begin the work on creating a 3D model of the character that we have created here today. At this point, before we sign off, I will see if anyone in the chat has any questions about anything that we covered here today, or maybe it has questions about something that perhaps I forgot to cover. We'll take a little bit of time on that. Alright, so far I'm not seeing any questions listed in the chat. I'll give it a little bit more time here. Oh, looks like we have a question here. Question is, as a DM or a player, how do you handle being in the middle of a conversation encounter situation where you need to look something up because you don't know it off the top of your head? Let's see. So you're saying just, are you saying more so for um, the purposes of being fluid, like if we're doing some sort of live stream, or what sort of aspect are we talking about here? Well, I'll answer it like this until you respond here. I'd say, as a DM, um, or even as a player, a lot of it is going to be handled. I mean, I would say it's handled in a very similar situation, because you can simply say that if you are, let's say you are role playing and you are in the middle of a conversation by doing that role play aspect, and you suddenly can't think of something, or you need to look up like a rule, or whatever it could be, you could make it clear to the DM or other players, or if you are the DM, you can just let your players know that you just need to take a quick pause, look up something. Um, you're saying, yeah, for the sake of roleplay, not making things awkward during that process. Well, I'd say a big part of it is, as much as it's nice to cut out every bit of awkwardness possible, unfortunately, you're not going to really always succeed in that regard. There's pretty much always going to be a guarantee there's going to be some bit of awkwardness involved. Um, a big part that can help with that is, your familiarity level with the people that you are playing with can make it less awkward. If it's just kind of settled into a local aspect of gameplay, everyone would understand that, you could just take a quick pause and just say, hey, sorry, I've just got to look up something real quick. And hopefully everyone would understand that you guys aren't going to be perfect, which is a big part of it. And then if it comes into the, if you're recording videos or doing live streaming, anything of that aspect of it, um, just you can try making things less awkward by kind of playing it off. You can just say to your viewers like, "Oh, sorry, my bad, guys. I just got to look up something real quick," and action. We're back into it again. You kind of try to play it off. Hope that helps with that. Would there be any other questions? As much as I, love answering questions in regards to gameplay, roleplay, all that side of things, would we have any other questions in regards to the aspect of character creation specifically, as well as what we're going to try to focus on here? While I wait on seeing if we have any questions to character creation specifically, I will answer this one. Is there a specific class you found is always helpful to have in a party? Oh, absolutely. Um, a cleric is always going to be one of the most helpful members of a party. So when it comes to creating your character, and you are, discussing with your, fellow players about, what everyone wants to play, if no one seems willing to play the cleric, honestly, I can say, if you haven't done it yourself before, I'd say to give it a try. Clerics can be a lot of fun to play. There are a variety of subclasses available to the cleric, um, with several different styles of play. Um, but above anything else, they can be extremely helpful for a party for their support aspect, because something that a lot of people don't really think about with an adventuring party is, as nice as it is to be able to deal a lot of damage, you have to realize that you're probably going to be taking a lot of damage yourselves. So having someone that can heal, you'll find that you're going to be a very valued member of that party if you're keeping your party members alive. Um, and dependent on the subclass that you go with for your cleric, generally speaking, most clerics are going to be, strong against more of the undead, which in a lot of campaign settings can be quite a common style of enemy to be found. So they definitely have a high level of versatility. And I will wait it out here for one more question at the most to kind of finish things off before we sign off. If there isn't another question, then we will just stop things here. But we'll wait it out for one more question at most. Absolutely. Cleric, definitely the MVP. All right. Well, let's just call things there with the Q&A for now. If there are any other questions that people think of in regards to uh, character creation in general, or even any of the topics that we did discuss here today, feel free to comment on the video, and I will keep tabs on that. So we will look at signing off here, but before I do, I would like to take a moment to just do a quick plug for one of our other series we have going on our Heleus YouTube channel here. We do have an ongoing D&D campaign in the Curse of Strahd campaign. There are presently 2 episodes out right now, and we usually aim to have those episodes live streamed on Sundays. Dependent on if there's technical glitches or anything like that, we usually aim to have those started around 1 p.m. Eastern, with the possibility of a late start if there's any technical issues. So, episode 3 should be occurring tomorrow, Sunday, September 5th, and we're aiming for around 1 p.m. Eastern for our start time. So if you haven't already checked that series out, I recommend that you check that out and stop on by for our live stream tomorrow as well. And lastly, we will cover a reminder here that in our next episode of this series, Visceral Storytelling, we will have Ryan discussing the topic of 3D modeling, and he will show you all the processes of doing 3D modeling in a specific program, where he will take our character we created here today, Zura, our barbarian princess, and giving her more, kind of fleshing her out, so to speak, in the digital format. So, again, thank you all for tuning in for episode 2 of our Visceral Storytelling series, Beginner's Guide to Character Creation in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we will see you for next week's episode.